Coming up in today's newscast, alleged Israeli airstrikes target a missile production plant in Syria. Nearly 100,000 Israelis protest to picket for LGBTQ+ equality. And Israel's under-20 basketball team writes a new chapter in Israeli sports history. Things may be developing quickly on the Syrian front, faster than previously suspected. Earlier this morning, 2 short-range ballistic missiles were fired from Syrian airspace at Israeli territory, triggering Israeli defense systems. In perhaps a related bit of breaking news, Russia's foreign minister has just arrived in Israel for a surprise visit to discuss top-level security issues with Prime Minister Netanyahu.
אני אפגש היום עם משלחת בראשות שר החוץ של רוסיה, סרגי לברוב, ורמטכ"ל צבא רוסיה, גרסימוב. המשלחת מגיעה לבקשתו של הנשיא פוטין בשיחה שהוא קיים איתי לפני ימים אחדים. אני אדון עמה בסוגיות אזוריות ובראשן המצב בסוריה. אני אציג למשלחת הרוסית את העמדה שהצגתי בפני הנשיא פוטין בביקורי האחרון במוסקבה. ישראל עומדת על כך שהסכמי ההפרדה בינה לבין סוריה יכובדו כפי שכובדו במשך עשרות שנים עד פרוץ מלחמת האזרחים בסוריה. וישראל תמשיך לפעול נגד כל ניסיון של איראן וגרורותיה להתבסס צבאית בסוריה.
Lavrov's arrival comes mere hours after Israel's new defense system, David's Sling, attempted to intercept the ballistic threat from Syria. Ultimately, both missiles fell short of their targets and detonated inside Syrian territory. At first, there was quite a bit of confusion, and most initially believed that this was merely a false alarm. But the army later confirmed that a threat had indeed been launched from Syrian airspace. This may very well be a kind of retaliation to an alleged Israeli airstrike on a Syrian military base last night. Regardless, Lavrov and Netanyahu will have plenty to discuss in today's meeting. Well, another round of airstrikes have just pummeled a Syrian base with links to Iranian forces. The 4th such attack this month. Israeli fighter jets were reported flying over Lebanese airspace en route to this facility, though as usual, the IDF has neither confirmed nor denied involvement in these alleged airstrikes. Regardless, the site of the attack is said to be a crucial weapons production plant for Iranian forces in the region. Proxy forces from Hezbollah are also known to frequent the base as well. This is the same facility where Syrian regime forces reportedly manufactured and stored deadly sarin gas used to carry out horrific war crimes against innocent civilians, though it's unclear if the site is still used for such purposes today. What is known is that Iran uses this base to build surface-to-air missiles and operates under the Scientific Studies and Research branch of the Syrian government. This airstrike was carried out in the late evening before nightfall, something of an outlier in Israeli attack strategy, which usually revolves around the cover of night. Videos posted to social media seem to suggest that Syrian air defense batteries were able to deflect a good portion of the attack, but smoke rising from the site does seem to indicate that at least some of the attack did land direct hits. Well, it's been 13 years since Israel unilaterally withdrew from the Gaza Strip, a decision that at the time proponents hoped would lead towards a lasting peace. But today, with no end in sight for the bloodshed and violence, many are taking a hard look back at the 2005 disengagement from Gaza, and they're wondering if this was indeed the right course of action. Here now with a retrospective look at this is Major General Shawn, a senior research fellow at the Begin Sadat Center for Strategic Studies. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your insights with us.
Thank you. Just 13 years ago, I was a division commander, responsible to this awful enterprise.
Wow.
That day, the day after Tisha B'Av, was the beginning.
Wow. So take us back. What was the atmosphere like leading up to that big decision from up top to disengage? Because of course there was huge debate in Israeli society about it, but in the military field.
But we must look upon that occasion not about memories, but just looking to the present and to the future. Because actually, doesn't matter what I thought that day, because I was from those who tried to convince that it will be really not a hope after we will really accomplish the withdrawal, because I was sure that everything that will emerge is not peace.
Right.
But right now, after 13 years, I must say, thanks God that it happened. Why? Because the Israelis and the world, the international community, can get empirical two models to compare which one is better, not only to Israelis, but to the human rights of Palestinians. We can just ask where the Israeli forces are more effective, in Judea and Samaria, that we are still there, or in Gaza, that we made an absolute withdrawal and we designed the space in a way that it is now divided to here and there. So three main premises collapse. These three premises have been promised by Ehud Barak, by Ariel Sharon, and all those that promoting the idea that it will lead to great stability. And all these three premises just collapse in empirical experience.
Sure.
The first one was that the idea that the American ambassador Martin Inning liked to use, good fences making good neighbors. It is good between John and Smith in Arizona, going to the same church on Sunday. It is not at all the situation here, because what we can realize that the good fence that the Israelis build, just protecting the Hamas and not the Israelis, because by this protection of the fence and the border, they succeeded to build well-formed military organization with battalion, brigades, well-trained soldiers, asset of rockets, infrastructure to build them, etc. So this premise collapsed. The second premise was that IDF is so powerful that it will be not at all a challenge if it will be demanded that
to go in and
we will react against them.
Well, look, that's
and what we are just observing now, that they are really succeeding to create a challenge, not because IDF is weak, not at all, because strategical considerations. Not every day the IDF could create a huge operation, and also huge operation in that situation, leading to a very great destruction and a lot of casualties, even among non-involved persons. So again, I'm asking where we can find better situation for human rights in Judea and Samaria, that if IDF entering that night to Nablus, it is more or less ending without casualties, of course without armor, without air force, or in Gaza. So this premise collapsed. The last premise was that after the Israeli will accomplish the withdrawal, the Israelis will have absolute legitimation, international legitimation to use their force. And what we are just observing, that we are yet criticized. And Hamas and the Palestinians, not everywhere, but still in a lot of public opinion, they are considered to be the victims and not the Israelis. So these three premises that collapse, leading us to the future to understand that the situation that we are leading today in Judea and Samaria must sustain, not to make two-state solution to the borders of 67. This is a lesson.
Well, I've got to ask, because, you know, just a few days ago, the IDF lost a soldier on the Gaza border. That's the first time that's happened since 2014. Yesterday, or in the last 48 hours anyway, a teenage Palestinian boy in the West Bank was shot during a raid. So there's violence on both sides still happening.
Yes, but just look about the whole outcome, how it is organized in Judea and Samaria. In the Judea and Samaria, in every day there is prosperity, because more than 100,000 working in Israel, bringing salaries, and from time to time there is a kind of protest, but it is not comparable to what's going on in Gaza.
Sure. No, I agree
not
with
at
you.
all
There's
comparable,
no...
and beyond that, we must understand that speaking about sovereignty is not at all a question about how many lost their life, because after 3 months that more than 50,000 dunam just born in the west north Negev surrounding Gaza, Where is Israeli sovereignty to protect the border? How many investment the Israelis must pay in order to protect themselves? Beyond that, how many hours of decision makers, government, are just demanded due to the problem in Gaza, and compare it to the situation in Judea and Samaria?
Sure.
Questions are decided at the headquarters of division, not every night to come to the cabinet, to the government.
One last quick question, although this is, of course, deeply complex. Given your insight and experience, specifically in Gaza, there's no going back now. So what should be done now, in your opinion, in Gaza? You can't send soldiers back in. So we have disengaged. So
First of all, a situation is like that. We don't want, really, it is not in Israeli interest to conquest again Gaza and to control Gaza. Because if we are speaking about the lessons we can learn from the battle in Mosul, for example, it took 9 months and great destruction. So
it was wiped out.
Whether
Families,
we want that,
wiped out as well.
the day after, we don't want to be those who are giving Gaza as a present to Abu Mazen with paying with our own blood, with our own soldiers' blood. So it is not our interest, but we must emphasize they are behaving in a way that they are realizing our constraints and trying to exploit them and pushing us to a way that we will not have any other choice but to come to invade and to destroy them, absolutely, because they are demanding that. And if they will not stop themselves, we will find ourselves in doing that, because we can do that.
Sure.
We don't want that. Beyond that, what to do with Gaza? They must get a lot of investment by international community and Egypt in order to reshape the humanitarian situation, to deliver jobs. It could be in Sinai. Not everything must depend upon Israel. Today, they are getting Israeli electricity, Israeli water, Israeli food. Without Israelis, they are really starving.
Sure. Well, Major General, thank you so much. This is obviously very complex, but your insight is always appreciated. Really appreciate you.
Thank you very much.
Of course. Well, yesterday, tens of thousands of Israelis flooded the streets to protest the government's failure to extend surrogacy rights to members of the LGBTQ+ community. Those numbers accumulated in perhaps one of the biggest rallies for gay equality in Israeli history, with nearly 100,000 Israelis gathering at Rabin Square last night, all of them demanding that the state finally grant civil rights to one of the country's most cherished and flourishing communities. Though the Knesset's summer recess has already started, this impressive display of support for the LGBTQ+ community has already landed somewhat of the desired result. Opposition parties in the Knesset managed to gather the 40 signatures necessary to trigger an emergency special Knesset session on gay rights. Prime Minister Netanyahu's attendance to this meeting is mandatory. Netanyahu initially pledged his support to an amendment promising same-sex surrogacy rights last week in a video published on his Facebook page. Mere days later, however, Netanyahu shocked the LGBTQ+ community by completely reversing and voting to pass the bill without that amendment. Israel has often advertised itself as one of the only places in the Middle East where members of this community can live and love in freedom, but legislation supporting this freedom has often been less forthcoming due to the high makeup of ultra-Orthodox presence in the current coalition. But this massive demonstration of outrage is a big indicator that this may very well be a major issue in any future elections.
We are a gay couple that have just married, and we have been trying to have a baby outside of Israel, and it costs a lot of money, almost 1 million shekels, and this is the money that we don't have. And we came here today to say to the government, no more. We want equality, and we want equal rights to everyone.
Time will only tell if this protest turns the right heads towards change. Now, as many of you know, the Western Wall in Jerusalem is one of the oldest relics of ancient Judaism on planet Earth. Now, the wall itself is a remnant of the Second Jewish Temple, which was built over 2,000 years ago. Well, like all things, time does take its toll, and a piece of the Western Wall has just spontaneously crumbled off of the ancient structure, suggesting that the holy site may be eroding slowly but surely. Considering the site's significance to Jews all over the world, this puzzling incident is a very delicate one. But it also has archaeologists and engineers alike a bit puzzled. One theory suggests that moisture lodged between the stones eventually gave way to the erosion. Another speculates that perhaps vegetation is growing between the cracks and loosening sediments. Ironically, this comes less than 24 hours after the Kotel was flooded with Jewish worshippers celebrating the Tisha B'Av holiday. Tisha B'Av commemorates the destruction of the Jewish temples in ancient times by the Babylonians and the Romans. Today, however, the wall's primary threat seems to be the natural erosion process. This section of the wall where the stone fell is actually under maintenance, meaning that no one was there when the massive rock tumbled dangerously to the ground. The platform where the rock smashed down upon is an area reserved for the future construction of an egalitarian plaza for mixed-gender prayer. Activists negotiated decades for an area where people could pray according to their own Jewish practices, but construction was frozen in recent years. Most recently, Knesset ministers who were assigned to oversee this construction repeatedly left the post, leaving this promise yet unfulfilled. But if you're worried that this holy site is falling apart, not to fear. Experts predict that it'll likely be hundreds of years before that danger becomes real. Well, by now it's no secret that Israel is a world leader in pioneering medical breakthroughs from cannabis. But now even more innovations are headed our way thanks to an Israeli company called Innovation Cannabis, or simply Anokhin. And here to tell us all about that is CEO of Anokhin Pharma, Iris Binkovich. Iris, thank you so much for joining. So what are you guys up to? What's the breakthrough?
Anokhin is a pharmaceutical company, which we are developing pharmaceutical products, topical pharmaceutical products at the first stage, combined with cannabinoid complex for a better life, to different kind of solutions. The first two products that we are focusing are for psoriasis and for pain relief. I would like to tell you about the founders of Anokhin. We are led by Ron Miron, who is the ex-CEO of Teva Israel, who's very experienced in all the OTC pharmaceutical products. And together with Yoram Drucker, who's an Israeli entrepreneur who already established two companies who are listed in the NASDAQ, Floristem and Biostorm, we have managed to add Nir Avram, who is the former chemist for Careline. He worked with Perrigo, developing all the topical formulation.
So really it's like the top heads of every branch you need to make a cutting-edge medical company, basically.
Yes, we have very experienced management team, established team that already had done this before. And this will actually allow rather quickly for new products to develop for this innovation cannabis therapy.
And how quickly do you guys develop new products? I mean, the market and the research is just exploding here in Israel now that the government has lifted sanctions on the research, right?
Yeah, so we are a very experienced team, and we have already prototype for the both formulations and a very extensive pipeline for additional products. Currently, we are doing equity fundraising by PeopleBiz, the platform in Israel, which will actually enable all the public, all the people to invest, depends on their interest and desire, and actually receive shares of the company. And by the end of 2018, we are planning to go public.
By the end of this year?
Yes.
Wow.
In the Canadian Security Exchange. And we are really excited for this move, enabling the Israeli people to take advantage and take part of this exciting industry, which is building.
Oh, I mean, we're covering this all the time. I feel like every week there's a new breakthrough with cannabis in treating Alzheimer's or MS or all kinds of diseases, and the research is just really endless. You guys are doing great work, so I hope you keep it up. We're out of time. We could talk about it forever, but I want to thank you so much, Iris, for coming in.
Thank you, Ron.
Of course. Well, another week, another batch of victims for British comedian Sacha Baron Cohen and his new Showtime series, Who is America? The second episode just aired last night on Showtime, and as usual, Cohen has delivered on his shocking brand of politically honed social comedy. And here with the breakdown is ILTV's Emmanuel Kadosh. Now, Emmanuel, what is the scoop here?
So even before Sacha Baron Cohen's new show, Who is America, even came out, people have been making, you could say, pathetic excuses as to why they did and said the things that they did on the show. Exactly.
Maybe.
Whether they were tricked into thinking they were in a real political interview or whether they were truly believed they were participating in a real terrorist training video, they all had something to say. We first spoke about Joe Walsh and Sarah Palin's objection to the Showtime show itself, but now that the second episode has aired, a few more people are coming out against it.
Right. So last week, of course, in the premiere, we saw Cohen dupe an array of former and current U.S. congressmen into backing a fictitious Israeli military program called Kinderguardians, and many of them said willingly on camera that they'd support the notion of arming children as young as 4 with handguns and rifles. Former Illinois Congressman, as you mentioned, Joe Walsh, said on camera, quote, "In less than a month, a first grader can become a first grenader." He obviously got a lot of flack for that ever since. So who's on the casualty list this time for episode 2?
Well, first off, Cohen was again disguised as an Israeli terrorism expert named Eran Morad. He interviewed Republican lawmaker Jason Spencer on the second episode, where he is seen screaming the N-word and running around with his pants down, trying to touch Cohen's character with his bare butt in order to turn him gay, as it says in the video. Now, if you ask me, regardless of whether Spencer was manipulated or tricked into coming onto Sacha Cohen's show, who does that? Honestly, who does that? And then when he figures out that it was filmed and aired, takes his actions back. You can't fake who you are when you think no one's watching, and that's exactly what I love about the Who is America show.
Well, you know, one of the big guests on this episode was also former Vice President Dick Cheney, I believe, right?
Right, correct. Along with the 20-second promo video that was released earlier this month that shows Cheney signing Morad's waterboard kit, it kept getting a lot worse, to say the least. Moran goes on to discuss all the wars that Cheney started and went on to ask him which one was his favorite, as if they were, you know, talking about flavors of ice cream. They also went on to discuss how many terrorists and potential terrorists Cheney reportedly killed and how he felt about it.
You know, look, I just want to say that, you know, politics aside, it's been interesting to watch the dialogue that comes out of the show. I mean, we're only 2 episodes in to the series, but already it's given people a lot to chew on, I guess. And at the end of the day, I think that's one of the most impressive things about the series, even more than the makeup. It's getting people to talk about some very deeply complex subjects that are rooted really in the base of our culture and our society. And maybe
that a lot of them wouldn't normally talk about.
Yeah, and maybe you like his comedy or his politics, or maybe you don't, but that dialogue itself is valuable. And I'm sure you'll be back next week with the new episode to break down season 3. We'll have more dialogue and more to talk about. Either way, thanks, Emmanuel.
Thank you.
Now, Croatian sports teams have been showing the world who's boss lately. The underdog nation most recently scored silver at the World Cup earlier this month and was slated to take home the gold at this year's FIBA Under-20 Basketball Championship until Israel's team stepped up to the plate, that is. For the first time ever, Israel's Under-20 team has taken it all the way to the finals and nabbed the championship title, beating Croatia 80-66. This is obviously a massive triumph for a team that was originally slated 35th to win. Led by Maccabi Tel Aviv guard Yovel Zuzman, who earned the FIBA MVP award, Israel stormed their way through the tournament by trouncing Greece, Spain, and France. And if you know the stats game, Team Israel notched massive improvements in ball recoveries, possessions, and three-pointer percentages. Zuzman himself earned that MVP trophy by scoring 17 points against Croatia with 11 rebounds. Fellow teammate Miran Rona also put 14 points up on the board. The team's impressive offense was backed by a brutally effective defense, all culminating in one of the most impressive feats for Israeli athleticism yet. This historic win marks another chapter in Israeli sports history as the country's first win on the European stage. Israeli ministers across the board took to social media to congratulate the team. Israeli basketball doesn't get nearly as much credit or screen time as it deserves, but hopefully with this win, that is all about to change.
The Hebrew word of the day is brought to you by IDC Samru Ulpan, open to everyone.
And now for our Hebrew word of the day. How did Vito Corleone get to become the Godfather? Well, he always made him an offer that they couldn't refuse, or as in our Hebrew word of the day, he made them a hatza'ah that they couldn't refuse. Now there's all kinds of hatza'ot, or offers that you can make someone. You can make a hatza'ah of some food that when you've got some guests over, or you can make a little business hatza'ah with a coworker or a client. But a hatza'ah can also mean a suggestion, which means that if someone offers you a good hatza'ah, always take it. On that note, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight should be clear and warm with a low of 78 or 26 degrees Celsius, and tomorrow should be partly cloudy with a slight increase in temperatures with a high of 90 or 32 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.63 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at ILTV.tv, and don't forget to follow us on Facebook at Israel English News, and of course on Twitter at ILTV News. I'm Brett Allen Smith, and thank you for watching.